Dad, forgive me. I would trade this diploma for just one more day with you. Daughter humiliates father who sold sandwiches on the street. Until she discovers what he did, every night in secret, and regrets it forever. How far would someone go to give a better future to the one they love, even if it means losing everything, even their own dignity? The greatest failure is not losing everything, but losing the love of the one who fought the most for us. Miguel watched sadly as the metal gates slowly closed. Each creak of the old iron echoed inside him, like a dark omen confirming his worst fears. He had dedicated half his life to that place, that factory, which was now shutting down without warning, without time for preparations, without room for plans. As he walked toward the makeshift parking lot, he felt the invisible weight of sudden unemployment pressing down on his weary shoulders. At 50, Miguel knew that starting over would not be easy. Once he reached his car, he sat in the driver's seat for a few moments, staring at the worn dashboard as he tried to organize his thoughts. The reality was harsh, immediate, and cruel. Lorena, his only daughter, was in her third year of college. He had promised her that nothing would stop her from graduating, that he would do whatever it took to ensure she earned her degree. Until now, his word had been enough. But now, without the job that supported the entire family, a wave of anxiety washed over him, leaving him breathless. Miguel turned the key in the ignition and drove slowly through the familiar streets. The small houses in the neighborhood, with their peeling facades and rusty fences, had always held a certain charm for him, a product of the honest effort of those who lived there. But now, for the first time, the neighborhood felt suffocating, almost claustrophobic. He felt trapped within his own life, unable to see a future beyond that devastating news. When he parked in front of the simple house they called home, he felt a pang of anticipatory shame. He knew he would have to tell Lorena, and this conversation would be one of the hardest he had ever had. She had always dreamed big, yearned for recognition and a bright future, far removed from the poverty that had shadowed her childhood. Miguel felt proud of his daughter's ambition, but he deeply feared her reaction to their new reality. As soon as he opened the front door, he found Lorena sitting on the couch, surrounded by books and notes. She quickly lifted her eyes, noticing something was wrong from the troubled look on her father's face. "Dad, did something happen? You look strange." Miguel slowly took off his worn jacket and hung it on the hook by the entrance, trying to buy time to organize the words that escaped him. "Honey, the factory closed. We lost our jobs today. All of us." Lorena froze, her eyes fixed on her father's face marked by worry. She swallowed hard, feeling anxiety swell rapidly. "But what do you mean it closed? And now, Dad, what are we going to do?" Miguel took a deep breath, unable to respond immediately. Lorena began to rise, restless, her eyes wide with panic. She paced the small living room, gesturing nervously. "Do you have any idea what this means? My college, my tuition. We were already stretched thin, Dad. I told you we should have tried for that full scholarship, but you insisted we would manage. How are we going to manage now?" Lorena's voice gradually rose, mixing desperation and frustration, making Miguel shrink inwardly. He felt a deep pain seeing his daughter in that state, but also a crushing weight of guilt that slowly crushed him. "Lorena, I swear I'll figure this out. I don't know how yet, but I promise you won't have to leave university. You will graduate. I promise that." Lorena suddenly stopped, turning to her father with a bitter expression. "Promise. Dad, look at our house. Look at our neighborhood. I have to pretend every day that I have enough money to keep up with my friends, that I can be part of that world. If they find out I'm broke, that we're poor." The young woman trailed off, embarrassed by her own words, but the sincerity of her fear had already been revealed. Miguel felt his heart tighten painfully as he realized the implicit humiliation in his daughter's words. She wasn't to blame for feeling that way, he thought, even if it hurt him deeply. "Are you ashamed of us, daughter? Is that what you're saying?" Lorena lowered her gaze, unable to meet her father's eyes. "It's not shame of you, Dad. It's shame of this situation, of seeming weak, of seeming inferior." Miguel took a deep breath, nodding slowly, trying to understand his daughter's feelings. He knew her well and understood that this anguish stemmed from years of trying to belong to a place that seemed to reject people like them. "Honey, you are not inferior to anyone. You deserve everything they have and more. If I have to sacrifice everything I have, I will. You will graduate, no matter the cost." Lorena looked up again, surprised by the firmness in her father's voice. She felt guilty for her outburst, but could not shake the deep fear she had of poverty and the judgment of others. She slowly approached him and gently held his calloused hands. "I know you would do anything for me, but Dad, please, don't do anything that leaves us even more vulnerable. I just wanted our life to be easier, that's all." Miguel squeezed his daughter's hands gently, feeling a new determination grow inside him. It didn't matter what he had to face. His purpose was clear. Nothing was more important than her future. That night, as Lorena retreated to her room, Miguel remained alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by piles of overdue bills and mortgage documents. The dim light above him flickered slightly, creating shadows that danced across the worn surface of the table. He reread each document, trying to find solutions that didn't readily appear. The numbers didn't lie. They had no savings, no reserve, only debts and growing expenses. Miguel pulled out a blank sheet of paper and began to write down possibilities. He thought of odd jobs, quick services, but he knew they wouldn't be enough. He needed something bigger, something that would guarantee immediate and steady income, even if it meant stepping completely out of his comfort zone. The clock ticked slowly, deep into the night, as he evaluated every possible option, feeling increasingly discouraged. It was then that his eyes fell upon an old cooler, discarded in the corner of the kitchen. A distant memory took hold of him. His late wife used to sell sweets and snacks to help with the family income before a sudden illness took her too soon. He never imagined he would need to do something similar, but in the face of this extreme situation, there was no room for pride. He slowly stood up, took the cooler in his hands, and examined it closely. It was dusty and worn, but it would still work. Taking a deep breath, Miguel decided, in that moment, that he would do whatever was necessary. It didn't matter what others thought. It didn't matter the embarrassment. The promise he made to Lorena had to be fulfilled, at any cost. Sitting back down at the table, Miguel wrote in bold letters his new goal: to sell sandwiches and quick snacks on the streets near the university campus. His mind began to work through practical details, like cheap ingredients and sales strategies, while a mix of fear and hope pulsed in his chest. On the other side of the thin wall, Lorena slept restlessly, unaware of what her father had just decided. Miguel, on the other hand, remained awake until the first light of dawn timidly flooded the kitchen, confirming his resolution. He would sacrifice everything, including his dignity, to ensure that Lorena's future was not destroyed by the unexpected layoff. However, Miguel still didn't know how much this decision would change his life, nor the unimaginable challenges he would have to face to honor his promise. And Lorena, asleep and vulnerable, had no idea that soon her comfortable life and carefully maintained appearances would be tested to their limits. This was just the beginning of a journey that would demand much more from both of them than they had ever imagined. And the cost of that decision would reach beyond what Miguel could foresee in that moment. Lorena woke up early, feeling the weight of her father's words still echoing in her mind. The sun streamed through the window, casting golden rays that contrasted sharply with the anguish tightening her chest. Taking a deep breath, she tried to shake off the discomfort and focus on the day ahead. As she got dressed, she chose her clothes carefully, aiming to project an image of confidence and success that she no longer felt. A discreet yet elegant dress matched what her classmates typically wore. She knew that if she maintained appearances, she could survive another day without raising suspicion. Arriving on campus, the image of wealth and tranquility seemed to permeate every corner. The well-maintained gardens, modern buildings, and wide hallways gave a sense of security and abundance that Lorena had always admired. However, on this particular day, that very scenery felt different. Now, those images only reinforced the vast distance between her reality and that of her peers. Feeling insecure, she walked slowly until she spotted her usual group gathered in one of the main corridors. "Good morning, Lorena!" exclaimed Marisa, a close friend, cheerfully. "How was your weekend?" Lorena forced a smile as she quickly searched for a convincing answer. "Oh, it was great. My dad and I went to check out some things for our trip next month," she lied, trying to sound casual. "He's thinking about New York this time." "Wow, New York again?" commented Andrew, another friend in the group. "You guys really love that place." Lorena nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. There was no trip planned, let alone money for something like that. Yet the lie came easily, honed over years of trying to hide her true financial situation. The conversations around her continued to be lively, with friends discussing trips abroad, expensive restaurants, and exclusive parties they frequently attended. Lorena felt even smaller, desperately wishing no one would notice her internal turmoil. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Miguel woke up after a few hours of restless sleep. Thoughts about how to sustain the household, pay the bills, and ensure his daughter's education had robbed him of peace throughout the night. He dressed in simple clothing, grabbed some resumes he had hastily prepared, and left to search for work. As he walked through the streets, he observed the city's hustle and bustle with a worried gaze, trying to imagine where he could find a new opportunity. His first stop was a job agency in the city center. Upon entering, he encountered a long line of people just as anxious as he was, all waiting for a chance to submit their resumes and hopefully land an interview. He waited patiently for his turn, his mind silently repeating a prayer, asking for luck. When he finally reached the counter, he was met by an attendant who, without even looking up from the papers she was reviewing, asked curtly, "Age and qualifications?" Miguel hesitated, feeling ashamed to respond, but forced himself to say clearly, 50 years old. I have experience in production line and industrial assembly." The attendant raised her eyes with visible disinterest, shaking her head as she skimmed through his resume. "Unfortunately, sir, positions for that profile are becoming increasingly rare. Companies prefer younger workers with more specialized training. But we'll keep your resume here in case something comes up," she added, lacking any enthusiasm. Miguel left the agency, downcast. The same scene repeated itself at other places he tried for a job that morning. From smaller companies to supermarkets, everyone had some reason to dismiss him. The subtle prejudice against his age and lack of specific qualifications left him feeling more discouraged. Back on campus, Lorena struggled to concentrate during her classes. Every time a professor mentioned costs, expenses, or investments in books and materials, she felt a growing tightness in her heart. After her last class, she noticed Andrew and Marissa animatedly discussing plans for dinner at a trendy restaurant. When they saw Lorena nearby, Andrew asked with a wide smile, "So, Lorena, are you coming with us tonight? It's at that new restaurant. They say it's amazing." Lorena felt suffocated. There was no way she could accept without further compromising her father's tight finances, but she also couldn't simply refuse without seeming odd. "I can't make it tonight, guys. My dad is taking me to an important event," she replied with a feigned calmness. "What a shame! Don't forget to tell us how that VIP party goes," Marissa teased. Lorena nodded, forcing another false smile as she quickly walked away, trying to hide the trembling in her hands. The weight of the lies began to bother her more than the initial fear of appearing poor. At the end of the day, Miguel sat in a busy square in the city center. He watched distractedly as people came and went, mentally recalling every closed door and every rejection he had faced that morning. The feeling of failure was overwhelming, and he questioned whether he could truly fulfill the promise he had made to his daughter. Then he noticed a simple yet bustling food stall. He watched intently as the vendor quickly handed out sandwiches and small snacks to hurried customers. The speed, simplicity of the business, and the money circulating quickly between hands caught his attention. Slowly, Miguel rose from the bench, walked over to the stall, and ordered a sandwich just to have an excuse to talk to the vendor. "How long have you been doing this?" Miguel asked while he waited. "I've been at it for a few years. It's tough at first, but when people start to like what you do, it takes off," the vendor replied with infectious simplicity. Miguel felt an unexpected relief as a new idea began to take shape within him. Perhaps this was the way. Maybe he could overcome his financial crisis by using something simple, direct, and honest. A means of sustenance that didn't depend on others' approval, his age, or even his education. He paid for the sandwich, thanked the vendor, and began to walk slowly down the street, already formulating plans in his mind. With every step he took, the certainty that this would be the solution grew clearer, even though a slight insecurity nagged at him, reminding him of the challenges he would face. Back at home, Lorena found a letter from the bank on the kitchen table, highlighting in bold red letters the critical state of their overdue mortgage. Her heart raced immediately, making her realize for the first time that the situation might be even worse than she had imagined. And while she tried to absorb the gravity of that discovery, she had no idea that at that very moment, Miguel was walking home with an idea that would change both their lives forever. Miguel just lost everything, but he refuses to give up on his daughter's future. How far will he go to keep his promise? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Leave a like and comment. It helps the channel grow and bring more powerful stories like this. Now, let's continue. Thank you for being here. The next day, Miguel woke up before the sun rose. He barely managed to sleep, tormented by the overdue bills piling up on the table and the painful memory of the rejection he faced the day before. As he prepared sandwiches in the cramped kitchen, he tried to push away his doubts with quick, automatic movements, as if he could somehow keep reality at bay. The ingredients were simple, but he took care to season and present them well, imagining that this could make a difference. When he finished, he put on an old apron that had belonged to his wife, now faded, and with small tears along the edges. The worn fabric brought him painful memories, but Miguel took a deep breath and continued getting ready, determined to face that first day with courage. As he stepped out of the house, walking with a makeshift cart, he felt the cold morning air brush against his face. His steps were slow and uncertain, yet resolute. Miguel carefully chose a strategic spot at the busiest corner, near the main entrance of the campus where Lorena studied. Meanwhile, Lorena arrived at the university, distracted and worried, still disturbed by the bank letter she had found on the kitchen table the night before. Her steps were quick, trying to escape her own thoughts, when she noticed some classmates gathered at the entrance. Marisa called her over, signaling for her to come closer. "Did you see that?" Marisa asked, glancing discreetly with her eyes. Lorena followed her gaze and felt her heart race violently. There, on the sidewalk near the main entrance, stood her father. Miguel was smiling gently at the students, offering the sandwiches he had prepared that morning, wearing the old, tattered apron. The image was devastating for Lorena, and a deep feeling of shame began to swell inside her. "Is that some homeless guy or a street vendor?" Andrew joked, laughing ironically. "I've never seen that guy around here before." Lorena felt a lump in her throat, unable to respond. Her body turned cold, and her breath became short. The fear of someone discovering that this humble man was her father paralyzed her from within. The shame she had been trying to avoid at all costs now felt inevitable. "Who is that guy, Lorena? You look like you've seen a ghost," Marisa commented, noticing her friend's discomfort. "Nobody important," Lorena replied quickly, diverting her gaze and trying to appear nonchalant. But her eyes kept involuntarily returning to Miguel, who, oblivious to the situation, continued offering his sandwiches with humility and a smile that revealed his shyness and insecurity. As the hours passed, the rumor about the man selling sandwiches at the campus entrance spread quickly through the hallways. Whispers and discreet laughter echoed all around, intensifying Lorena's anguish. Each time she heard someone mention that humble man, her face burned with embarrassment. She tried to focus on her classes, but the persistent thought that her father was out there, exposing their poverty, made her feel small and humiliated. At lunchtime, Lorena decided to sneak out through the side entrance, avoiding the main sidewalk where Miguel was still selling. But as she turned the corner, she came face to face with him, now closer than before. Miguel noticed her presence immediately, breaking into a sincere smile full of hope. "Lorena!" he exclaimed, holding out a sandwich he had set aside just for her. "I brought your favorite lunch. I know you didn't have time to eat this morning." Lorena felt a surge of panic. She glanced around quickly, hoping no one had heard. But it was too late. A few students stopped to observe the scene, and Marisa, who had followed her, approached, confused. "Wait, Lorena, do you know this guy?" Marisa asked, surprised. Miguel, unaware of his daughter's embarrassment, responded with an innocent smile. "Yes, I'm her father. I came to bring her some sandwiches to make sure she had lunch." Lorena felt all eyes turn to her. Her heart raced violently in her chest, and tears began to well up involuntarily in her eyes. Breathing heavily, she stepped forward and faced her father with a deeply hurt expression. "Why are you doing this to me?" she asked, her voice trembling with pain. "Don't you understand how you're ruining my image here?" Miguel stepped back, visibly shaken by his daughter's reaction. The smile on his face slowly faded, replaced by an expression of sadness and confusion. "Lorena, I just wanted to help. I didn't think this would embarrass you like this," he tried to explain with a quivering voice. "You never think, Dad," Lorena replied, letting all her accumulated frustration spill out. "Can't you see you're destroying me? I try to be normal. I try to fit in. But you need to show up here dressed like that. Selling sandwiches like a beggar?" Her words struck Miguel like a deep blow. He fought to maintain his composure, taking deep breaths as he struggled not to cry in front of everyone. Slowly, he looked down, feeling an immense pain in his chest. "I'm so sorry, daughter," he said in a choked voice, trying to sound strong. "I just wanted to make sure you could keep studying without worrying." "But that's not how you're going to help me. You just exposed me even more," Lorena screamed, letting her emotions take over completely. Marisa stepped closer, placing a hand on her friend's shoulder, trying to console her. "Lorena, calm down. It doesn't have to be like this." Lorena pulled away abruptly. "You don't understand, Marisa. No one understands." With tears streaming down her face, Lorena cast a painful, hurtful look at her father. "I don't want to be seen near you anymore. I don't want you to come here anymore," she declared in a firm yet trembling voice. "You need to understand that I'm not like you and I never will be. I just want a different life." Miguel felt the weight of each word. The pain he felt in that moment was something he had never imagined possible. Even so, he did not react with anger or hurt. He took a deep breath and, with a broken heart, replied softly, "That's okay, Lorena. I'll respect your wish. I just want you to know that everything I did was for you." Without saying anything more, Miguel began quietly gathering his belongings while Lorena, overwhelmed by shame and anger, quickly walked away, leaving him alone on the sidewalk, with curious and judgmental eyes all around him. Miguel's heart was shattered, but there remained within him a deep determination. And now, more than ever, he knew he needed to find another way to keep caring for his daughter, even if it cost him all the dignity he had left. Lorena, on the other hand, was about to discover that the consequences of her words would be even more painful than she could imagine. After that humiliating day at the university, Miguel returned home in silence, carrying not only the weight of the empty cart, but also the shame his daughter had imposed on him in public. The gentle smile had completely vanished, replaced by a weary and melancholic expression. Still, he tried to keep hope alive, telling himself he needed to keep going, that all of this would pass one day. The next morning, still feeling down, he returned to the same routine. He prepared the sandwiches with the same dedication, struggling not to think about Lorena's cruel words, which echoed painfully in his mind. The faded apron felt heavier, a constant symbol of humiliation. But Miguel persisted, choosing a more discreet spot to avoid causing further embarrassment to his daughter. However, even that wasn't enough. Soon after setting up his makeshift stand, a city inspector approached, looking at him sternly. "Do you have a permit to sell here, sir?" the inspector asked in a cold, bureaucratic tone. Miguel swallowed hard, feeling his throat tighten. "Well, not exactly. I'm just trying to support my daughter and pay the bills. I really need to keep working, sir." The inspector shook his head disapprovingly and pulled out a ticket book. "I'm sorry, but I have to fine you. Informal commerce is not allowed without a permit." Miguel accepted the ticket in silence, feeling the weight of the paper like a stone. He glanced quickly at the amount and closed his eyes for a moment, knowing that some would be impossible to pay. His already fragile financial situation was now heading towards absolute despair. Meanwhile, at the university, Lorena tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy in front of her classmates, but felt deeply tormented by guilt. She avoided talking about what had happened, but was acutely aware of the discreet glances and whispered conversations. When Marisa asked about her father, Lorena forced a smile and lied. "My dad had to travel far away. He's taking care of a sick relative in the countryside. I haven't heard from him in a few days." Marisa nodded, believing her friend's words, unaware of the discomfort hidden behind that response. Lorena felt even worse for lying, but she couldn't bear to admit the truth. The thought of her classmates discovering her family's real situation was unbearable. She tried to bury her guilt under the justification that she was protecting herself, even though she knew deep down how wrong she was. The following days were especially hard for Miguel. The fines piled up quickly, and the debts had already surpassed what was tolerable. Sitting at the kitchen table, cluttered with overdue bills and scattered papers, he desperately tried to find a solution when his gaze fell upon an official letter from the bank. He felt a pang in his heart as he opened it and read that the house would be taken due to non-payment of the mortgage. Taking a deep breath, Miguel realized he had no more options. He needed to sell the house before the bank seized it completely, ensuring at least a minimal sum to support Lorena's studies. Driven by this harsh but necessary decision, Miguel began to slowly empty the house he had lived in for so many years. Each object he held carried painful memories, but none were as intense as the old photographs of his late wife. As he carefully gathered the images, his hands trembled, and tears filled his eyes. He remembered the happy days when they still had plans and dreams, when Lorena was just an innocent and joyful child, long before money and shame tore them apart. Among the photographs, he found one that touched him deeply. Lorena, as a little girl, holding his hand while smiling brightly in front of the old city park. Back then, they had little, but it was enough for them to be happy. Miguel wondered when everything had changed so much, and how his daughter had become so distant from that sweet and simple girl. By the end of the day, the house was practically empty, with boxes stacked and furniture disassembled. Miguel sat on the cold floor of the living room, now devoid of furniture or life, reflecting on his journey. The silence around him was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of traffic. The emptiness of the house mirrored the emptiness in his chest, a sense of loneliness and failure that consumed him slowly. He looked at Lorena's bedroom door, now dark and empty, and felt a deep sadness at the thought that he might never again be able to offer her the comfort and security he so desperately wanted. He thought of all the times he had tried to protect her, all the decisions he had made to ensure a better future. And yet, here he was, at his lowest point, abandoned by his own daughter, and without a home to offer. That night, as he finished stacking the boxes, Miguel made the hardest decision of his life. He would leave the house that very morning. There was nothing left for him there. With the little money he could get from the sale, he would ensure Lorena could continue her studies. With a heavy heart, he loaded his bags and boxes into the old car parked in front of the house. Before leaving for good, he went back inside one last time, looking around each empty room. In the dark, he heard the distant echo of Lorena's joyful laughter as a child, and felt tears streaming down his face silently. Closing the door slowly behind him, Miguel realized that from that moment on, he would be sleeping in the car, under the cold and hardships of the street, while planning his next uncertain step. As he sat in the car and looked one last time at the house that had been his refuge and home for so many years. Miguel felt more alone than he had ever imagined possible. The future was uncertain and frightening, but the image of Lorena's smile in his mind was still strong enough to make him persist. Meanwhile, Lorena, oblivious to the silent drama her father was living, still believed he was far away, taking care of a distant relative, thus protecting herself from facing the harsh consequences of her own actions. However, little did she know that the world she knew was about to crumble even further, revealing a reality that would completely change the way she saw herself and the man she had so cruelly rejected. Lorena had convinced herself that distancing was the best choice for both of them. She justified it by telling herself that her father would be better off without her pressure, without her harsh judgment weighing down on him. She began spending more nights at the university dorm, avoiding contact as much as possible. If Miguel had really left to care for a sick relative, as he had told his friends, then there was no reason to worry. But deep down, she knew that story was a convenient lie, crafted to protect herself from shame and guilt. With the free time away from her father and the illusion that her life continued normally, Lorena started to immerse herself even more in the world she so desperately wanted to belong to. She spent part of her partial scholarship on new clothes, trying to fit into the standards of her wealthy peers. She began to go out more frequently, attending parties and dinners she couldn't afford before. Her circle of friends grew, and for a time, she managed to believe that she finally belonged to that social circle she had long admired. That night, she was leaving a gathering at an upscale restaurant where she had overindulged in drinks. She felt light, laughing at superficial jokes that she didn't even find funny. The cold wind of the early morning pricked her skin as she waited for a taxi, but checking her phone, she realized that the money she had wouldn't be enough to pay for the ride back to the dorm. Sighing, she adjusted her coat and decided to walk a bit before calling a cheaper ride. The streets were empty, illuminated only by scattered streetlights and the glow of closed store windows. As she walked, the lightness of the alcohol began to fade, replaced by an unsettling restlessness that settled in her chest. It was as if something was calling to her, something invisible that made her heart tighten with each step. Then, as she turned a corner, her eyes caught sight of an old car parked at the end of the street. A worn-out sedan with dull paint and bald tires. A vehicle that looked strangely familiar to her. Lorena's heart raced. She recognized that car. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, feeling the blood run cold in her veins. For a moment, she thought she was seeing things, that it was just a coincidence. But as she got closer, she recognized every detail. The small sticker on the back window, the scratches on the body, the side mirrors patched up with tape. It was her father's car. The shock made her stumble. What was that car doing there, abandoned on that dark street? Wasn't her father supposed to be in another city? Driven by an uncontrollable impulse, Lorena took a few hesitant steps and leaned slightly to look through the window. The glass was fogged up from the cold night, and she had to rub the sleeve of her coat against it to see inside. What she saw hit her like a punch to the stomach. Miguel was curled up in the back seat, asleep under old blankets and worn clothes. His face, partially hidden in the shadows, appeared exhausted, aged, burdened by the weight of a hard life. There were crumpled bags on the front seat, a half-empty water bottle, and leftover bread on a piece of newspaper. This was where he was living. Lorena's heart shattered in her chest. The images of the luxurious party, the expensive dinner, the frivolous shopping from the previous week flashed through her mind like a distorted nightmare. While she spent money to impress people who didn't even care about her, her father was sleeping in a car, under thin blankets that barely shielded him from the cold. Her eyes burned, and a knot formed in her throat. She tried to push the guilt away, to tell herself that she hadn't known about this before, but nothing could lift the weight of the truth that now crushed her chest. Outside, the cold wind made her body tremble. But inside, Miguel slept, likely exhausted from another hard day of work, carrying a burden that Lorena had refused to see. She wanted to bang on the glass, wake him up, say something, but how could she? How could she look into her father's eyes after having rejected him so many times? What could she say that would fix what she had done? Tears streamed down her face uncontrollably. She felt an overwhelming despair, a desperate need to go back in time and stop herself from being so cruel. But time doesn't turn back. What remained now was the raw and painful truth. Her father had lost everything, even a roof over his head, so she could continue her studies. The rain began to fall, thin and cold, staining the dark asphalt. The cold drops slid down Lorena's face, mingling with her warm tears. She hugged her own body, feeling as small as she had ever felt. For a few seconds, she stood there, watching Miguel sleep, trying to gather the courage to wake him. But every time she thought about calling him, shame held her back. She couldn't do it now, not like this. Taking a deep breath, she took a step back. The sobs still trembled in her throat, but it wasn't there, in the middle of the street, that she would resolve this. She needed to think. She needed to do something to fix everything. With her chest tight and her eyes misty, she turned her back on the car and walked slowly away, feeling the weight of the truth pressing down on her shoulders. This time, she couldn't simply ignore it. Something had to change, and fast. Lorena didn't sleep that night. The weight of her discovery crushed her chest, making it impossible to close her eyes without the image of her father curled up in the car haunting her again. Every detail of that scene was etched in her mind. The thin blankets, the plastic bags with leftover food, the visible exhaustion on Miguel's face even while he slept. Regret gnawed at her insides, and the only thing she could think about was how to fix it. As the sun began to light up the sky, she was already dressed and on her way to campus, but not to attend classes. This time, her priority was to find Miguel. When she arrived at the sidewalk where he usually sold sandwiches, her heart raced. There he was, arranging his cooler and trying to organize the few ingredients he had left. His face looked worn, the dark circles under his eyes revealing sleepless nights. Despite the cold, he wore only a thin shirt, as if his body had grown accustomed to the lack of comfort. Lorena stopped a few meters away, hesitant. She didn't know how to start. She wasn't sure if he even wanted to talk to her after so much time apart, after all the times she had looked down on him. But there was no more time to delay. Taking a deep breath, she approached him. "Dad!" Miguel looked up, surprised to see her there. His eyes darkened, and he quickly looked away, returning to organize his bread. "If you came here to tell me you're still ashamed of me, you can leave," he said, his voice hoarse and cold. The words cut through Lorena like a knife. She tried to stay strong. "That's not it. I need to talk to you." He let out a bitter laugh. "Now you need to talk to me? After all this time pretending I don't exist? After treating me like I'm a burden in your life?" Lorena felt her stomach churn. She knew she deserved that, but hearing it was far worse than she had imagined. "I know I was wrong, Dad. I know I was selfish. But yesterday, I saw the car." Miguel froze for a moment. "What?" "I saw where you're sleeping. I saw how you've been living, and I Her voice faltered. The tears she had held back all night began to flow, but Miguel showed no reaction beyond the deep weariness in his gaze. "So you finally discovered," he murmured, adjusting a package of ham inside the cooler. "Discovered that while you spent money on parties and new clothes, your dad was sleeping in a car." The blow was precise. Lorena swallowed hard, struggling not to crumble right there in front of him. "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know," he shot back. "I've always been here. I've always tried to help you. But you chose to look the other way." The guilt grew inside her like a suffocating knot. "Forgive me," she said, her voice choked. This time, Miguel looked directly at her. There was something different in his gaze. It wasn't anger or explosive hurt, but rather a silent exhaustion. "Forgiveness?" he repeated. "Forgiveness doesn't pay for the nights I spent hungry. It doesn't pay for the cold I felt. It doesn't pay for the times I wanted to text you and held back because I knew you would be ashamed of me." Lorena felt her legs weaken. "I know it doesn't pay, but I want to help. I want to change this." Miguel laughed again, this time with sarcasm. "And how do you plan to do that? Are you going to pretend I'm a stranger until you graduate? Are you going to keep ignoring me to not tarnish your reputation?" "No," she rushed to say. "I want to fix everything." Miguel sighed, rubbing his face. He clearly seemed tired of the conversation. "Look, Lorena, I don't need your pity. You've made it clear how you feel about me. Now, let me continue my work." She felt desperation take over. Her father was pulling away from her, and if she didn't do something now, she might never get another chance. That's when the idea came to her. She couldn't just say she wanted to change, she had to show it. That same day, after leaving campus, she met with Marissa, her only true friend. At the small cafe where they used to study, Lorena poured out the whole truth about her dad, about the lies, about the devastating discovery from the night before. "Oh my God, Lorena," Marissa whispered, shocked. "Your dad? He's been living in a car all this time?" Lorena nodded, wiping her eyes. "And he won't accept my help. He's too hurt to even listen to me." Marissa thought for a few moments and then suggested, "If he doesn't want you to help him directly, then have others help." "How?" "You need to tell the truth, show what's going on." Lorena hesitated. "You want me to expose my dad?" "It's not about exposure," Marissa said. "If people know what he's going through, someone might offer help. It could be a job, a permit for him to sell without being fined, anything. But as long as nobody knows his story, he'll keep facing this alone." Lorena fell silent for a moment. The idea seemed absurd, but at the same time, it made sense. That night, with her heart racing, she turned on her phone's camera and started recording. "My name is Lorena, and I'm here to tell the story of the most incredible man I've ever known." She talked about Miguel, how he had always worked hard to give her a better life. She shared about the layoff, the selling of their house, the sacrifices he made without ever asking for anything in return. And finally, she revealed what she had discovered, that her father was living in a car so she could continue studying. The video was posted. Within hours, it began to gain views. In one day, it had been shared hundreds of times. People commented in shock, offering help, wanting to know how they could contribute. But Miguel, when he found out about the video, his reaction was devastating. "How could you do this to me?" he asked, his voice filled with betrayal. "Dad, I just wanted to help." "Don't you understand? I've already lost my dignity once. Now you want me to lose it again, becoming a spectacle on the internet? Lorena tried to argue, but he wouldn't listen. He turned away and walked off, and in that moment, she realized she had hurt him even more. The next day, Miguel didn't show up to sell sandwiches. No one knew where he was. And when she finally found him, her heart froze. Miguel was curled up in the car, shaking with a fever. He had fallen ill, and he refused any help. Lorena thought she was helping, but now Miguel feels more distant than ever. Will he ever forgive her? Subscribe now and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part of this emotional journey. Leave a like and comment. Your support helps the channel bring more powerful stories to life. Let's continue. Thank you for watching. Lorena could hardly breathe as she saw Miguel trembling in the car seat, his pale lips and curled body wrapped in a thin blanket that did little against the biting cold of that night. Her heart raced, and she threw herself to open the door. "Dad!" Miguel opened his eyes with effort, his heavy eyelids weighed down by fatigue and the fever consuming him. His face was sweaty, and his breathing was irregular. "What are you doing here?" he murmured, his voice weak. "I came to help you." Lorena cupped his face in her hands, feeling the heat radiating from his skin. "You're sick. You need to go to the hospital." Miguel tried to push her away, but he didn't have the strength. "I don't just need to rest." "You can't keep going like this." Despair overflowed in her voice. "Please, Dad." But Miguel simply closed his eyes, too exhausted to argue. Lorena took a deep breath. She couldn't waste any time. She ran to the other side of the car, opened the door, and carefully pulled her father up, supporting him on her shoulder. "I'm getting you out of here," she whispered, determined. Hours later, Miguel awakened on a small sofa inside Maurice's apartment. The smell of warm tea and soup filled the air. His body still trembled, but this time it was covered with a thick, dry blanket. "Where am I?" he murmured. "In my apartment," Marisa replied, sitting beside him. "And before you try to argue, know that you had a high fever and needed a warm place to sleep." Miguel tried to protest, but his body surrendered to the unexpected comfort. He closed his eyes, exhausted. Lorena watched from a distance, feeling the weight of guilt crushing her shoulders. "He needs to rest, Lorena," Marisa said softly. "We'll see what to do tomorrow." But Lorena already knew what she would do. She grabbed her phone and opened the social media app. Her video had already reached over 50,000 views. Some people were empathizing with her story, offering help. Others criticized her for only taking action now. The comments were split between support and judgment. "This man is a hero. How can we help him?" His daughter only realized this now? Seems like she's trying to clean her own image. He deserves a dignified home. How could someone leave their own father in this situation? The words pierced Lorena like tiny knives, but she knew she couldn't afford to be offended. She had made mistakes, but now she needed to fix them. The next day, at dawn, she met with Marisa and Mr. Bradford, the acting dean of the university. "I want to help Miguel," Bradford said, glancing at the video statistics on her phone. "But we need a solid plan." "We can create a fundraising campaign," Marisa suggested. Bradford nodded. "I can also help spread his story to contacts who might offer formal work, but we'll need his permission." Lorena hesitated. "He won't accept? He has too much pride." "Then convince him," Marisa urged, "because as it stands, he won't last much longer." Miguel woke up at noon. He still felt weak, but he felt slightly better. When he saw Lorena sitting beside him, he sighed. "So, now you're my babysitter?" She smiled awkwardly. "Suits. Someone has to take care of you since you don't take care of yourself." He looked away. "I'm already better. You don't need to worry." Lorena took a deep breath. "Dad, we need to talk." Miguel knew what was coming. "I don't want charity, Lorena." "This isn't charity," she insisted. "It's justice. You've worked hard your whole life and now you're being treated like a homeless person. That's not right." Miguel clenched his fists. "And what do you want me to do? Humiliate myself for breadcrumbs?" "They're not breadcrumbs." She held up her phone and showed him the thousands of comments. "These people want to help. They want to give you a chance to start over." Miguel stared at the screen for a long time. His eyes reflected something that Lorena couldn't identify. Finally, he sighed. "What exactly do you have in mind?" Lorena smiled, feeling that for the first time her father was willing to listen. In the following weeks, the fundraising campaign began to gain momentum. People from the community, university students, and even strangers rallied to help Miguel. The money raised would be enough to get him out of the car and regularize his situation as a street vendor. But, as always, life didn't make it easy. On a cold morning, while Lorena was preparing to meet her father at his sales spot, she received a frantic phone call from a local shopkeeper. "A city inspector just showed up here. He says he's going to fine and seize your father's car." The ground seemed to disappear beneath her feet. Lorena arrived running, her heart racing. Miguel was standing next to his car with an impassive expression while a city inspector checked his documents. "This is illegal," the inspector said. "You don't have a license to sell here." "I have nowhere to go," Miguel replied, remaining calm. "Durs, that doesn't change anything. Your activities are being shut down immediately." Lorena approached, blood boiling. "You can't do this." The inspector looked at her with indifference. "Law is law, miss. If you want to sell, you have to do it within the rules." And with that, Miguel was officially prohibited from continuing there. He didn't protest. He simply lowered his head and began to gather his things. Lorena, however, would not accept that injustice. In the following days, she worked tirelessly to ensure Miguel wouldn't lose everything at once. She contacted friends, professors, and even university lawyers to find a solution. Then, finally, a response arrived. A local company, touched by Miguel's story, offered to help him obtain a license and a legal food cart. It was the first step toward a fresh start. When Lorena told Miguel the news, he fell silent for a long time. "Is this real?" She smiled. "Yes, Dad. You're going to have your own space, without worrying about inspectors or fines." Miguel didn't respond immediately. He looked at his calloused hands, contemplating. Then, for the first time in a long while, he smiled. That night, as she watched her father organize the documents to formalize his new business, Lorena felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The journey was still not complete. There was much to be rebuilt, but for the first time, she felt they were on the right path. And she wouldn't rest until she saw Miguel rise again completely. The small rented apartment was neither luxurious nor comfortable, but for Miguel, it was much more than just walls and a ceiling. It was dignity. He looked around the cramped space, with a single bed pushed against the wall, a simple table, and an old electric stove. Everything fit in there, squeezed together. But it was a home. A sigh escaped his lips as he dropped his one suitcase in the corner of the room. Lorena watched from the doorframe, holding her anxiety close to her chest. "At least it's better than the car," she ventured, a faint smile on her face. Miguel nodded, not looking at her. "At least there's hot water." Silence hung between them, heavy with everything that had yet to be said. Lorena knew her father was grateful, but she also knew that pride and hurt still held him back. She didn't expect an apology to erase everything in an instant. "I know it doesn't change what happened," she continued, trying to find a way to reach him. "But I want to keep helping, Dad. I want this to work." This time, Miguel looked at her, tired but sincere. "I don't want to depend on anyone anymore, Lorena. I want to work and pay my bills on my own." She nodded, understanding. "And you will." It was then that Lorena took an envelope from her pocket and handed it to her father. Inside were the papers for the small food truck they had managed to buy with the fundraising efforts. Miguel opened the folder with hesitant fingers, as if the document might crumble. When he saw his name on the registration, his eyes widened. "Is this real?" "Yes," Lorena confirmed. "It's yours." He ran his hands over the papers, trying to absorb the reality before him. Emotion caught him off guard, and he swallowed hard. "Does this mean I can go back to work?" "It means you can start over, Dad. This time without having to run from inspectors or sleep in a car." Miguel's expression softened for a moment, but soon hardened again. He wasn't ready to embrace her, to admit how much he needed this. But Lorena saw, even without words, that he had accepted it. The following days were filled with hard work. The trailer needed some adjustments before it was ready to operate, and Miguel wanted to do everything himself. Lorena accompanied him at every step, helping to paint the sides, adjust the counters, and install the necessary equipment. At the mechanic shop where they took the trailer for a checkup, the owner, an older man with graying hair and grease-covered hands, watched Miguel with an understanding gaze. "Starting something new?" he asked while tightening the screws on the body. Miguel nodded. "After a lifetime in the factory, I'm now the owner of a food truck." The man smiled. "Owning your own business has its perks, but it's hard work." "I already know that," Miguel replied, wiping the sweat from his forehead. Lorena watched the exchange with a mix of pride and relief. Seeing her father putting effort into this new beginning gave her hope that the wounds between them could also heal. While they waited for the repairs, they went shopping for utensils to equip the trailer. Miguel scrutinized every detail with a critical eye, testing pots and checking the sturdiness of the counters. "Have you always been this detail-oriented?" Lorena asked, amused to see him so focused. "In the factory, if you messed up a part, you could compromise the entire production," he explained. "And I've never liked doing anything halfway." She smiled, realizing how much that said about the man he was. "So this is going to be the best food truck in town." Miguel looked at her, and for the first time he smiled back. When the trailer was finally ready, Miguel woke up before dawn to prepare everything. He didn't say it out loud, but Lorena could see the spark in his eyes. There was a new energy in him, a desire to make this work. That morning, they parked the trailer in the licensed spot, in a busy square near the university. The smell of bread toasting on the grill and meat sizzling with Miguel's special seasoning soon began to attract the first customers. Lorena helped with the orders, serving the sandwiches with a smile. At first, Miguel seemed uncomfortable with the idea of selling to so many strangers, but as people tried his food and praised it, he began to relax. "This is amazing," one of the customers said, licking his fingers. "Miguel, I could eat this every day," another person commented. Then something unexpected happened. A group of university students appeared in line, including some of Lorena's acquaintances. She froze for a second, bracing for mockery, but instead, one of the guys leaned over the counter and said, "You're Lorena's dad, right?" Miguel looked at his daughter before responding. "Yes, that's me." The student smiled. "Well, I'll take one of those sandwiches too. They say your food is the best here." Lorena felt warmth spread in her chest. For the first time, there was no shame, only pride. When the line finally diminished, Miguel wiped his hands on the apron and looked at his daughter. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" "Did what?" "You put me here in front of the university so all your friends would see me." Lorena laughed. "No, Dad. I put you here because you deserve to be recognized for what you do best." He fell silent for a moment, then murmured, "Maybe I raised a daughter who's too smart." She smiled. "And maybe I have a more incredible dad than I realized before." That night, as they closed the trailer, Miguel leaned against the wall and let out a long sigh. "Are you sure you want to keep helping me?" he asked. "I want to help until you don't need me anymore," Lorena replied. Miguel looked at her seriously before finally nodding. "Then we'll start early tomorrow." Lorena smiled, knowing that, although her father still hadn't said it in words, this was the beginning of something new between them. The following week, while reviewing some college documents, Lorena received an unexpected email. It was an official notice informing her that her graduation was approaching. She felt a tightness in her chest. Her gaze drifted to the trailer parked outside, where Miguel was preparing the ingredients for the next day. Would he be there to see her? She wanted to believe so, but deep down she knew that forgiveness was still not complete. And there was only one way to find out. Lorena stared at her cell phone screen, her fingers hesitating over the keyboard. The college announcement was still open on her laptop. The date was set. In a few weeks, she would step onto the stage to receive her diploma. But what truly mattered to her at that moment wasn't the ceremony, her classmates, or the photos. It was Miguel. She needed him to be there. Ever since they started working together at the food truck, the relationship between father and daughter had improved. They talked more, shared smiles, and even joked during the long nights of work. But there was an invisible limit between them, a barrier that Miguel still wouldn't fully let down. Every time graduation came up in conversation, he would look away, murmur a "we'll see," and change the subject. Lorena felt deep down that this was still a reflection of the pains he carried. That night, after closing the truck and putting away the equipment, she sat next to her father at the small table in the apartment he rented. It was simple, but more welcoming than everything they had been through in recent months. "You're not going to run away from this, are you?" she asked, keeping her voice light. Miguel sighed, finishing folding a dish towel. "I'm not running away. I just don't know if I'm welcome there." Lorena frowned. "What do you mean? Of course you are." He rubbed his hands over his face, lost in thought. "I don't know if I have the right to be there after everything." Lorena's heart tightened. She tried to hide her frustration, but it was difficult. "Dad, you funded my college. You did everything for me. If anyone has the right to be there, it's you." Miguel smiled, but it was a smile without spark. "It's more complicated than that, Lorena." She wanted to insist, but she could see it wouldn't help. The next day, she decided to talk to Marissa. "He's still hesitant, I know," Lorena vented, sitting with her friend at a cafe near the university. "And I don't know what to do to convince him." Marissa, who had witnessed Lorena's transformation over the past months, rested her chin on her hand and thought for a moment. He just needs a push, Lo. Maybe a wake-up call. What do you mean? Maybe if he realized that this graduation isn't just about you, but also about him, things would change. The idea lingered in Lorena's mind for the rest of the day. When she returned to the food truck, she found Miguel finishing up organizing supplies for the next day. She took a deep breath and went straight to the point. I want you to practice a speech with me. Miguel raised his eyebrows. Speech? Yes, at graduation. He laughed. I'm not going to step on that stage. You should, she countered. After all, this diploma is as much yours as it is mine. Miguel paused, his dark eyes studying his daughter. There was something in the way she spoke that made him hesitate. I'm not good with words, Lorena. You don't need to be. You just need to be there. He looked away and returned to sorting the boxes of ingredients. I'll think about it. Lorena sighed. She knew that I'll think about it was just a polite way to say he didn't want to talk about it. Time passed, and the food truck began to gain popularity. Loyal customers returned every week. Some students stopped by after classes for snacks, and even workers in the area knew Miguel by name. Lorena felt proud of her father, but she also felt a weight in her chest. There were only a few weeks left until graduation, and he still hadn't given her an answer. The university entered a frenetic pace of preparations. The ceremony rehearsals, final exams, the hustle of classmates planning parties and trips. Lorena saw the excited groups, but couldn't feel the same enthusiasm. For her, the only thing that mattered was knowing if Miguel would be there that day. One day, after returning from university, she found her father sitting outside the food truck, gazing at the horizon. He looked thoughtful, tired. What's wrong? She asked, sitting beside him. Just thinking, Miguel replied. About what? He hesitated before responding. About how everything has changed. Lorena took a deep breath. Changed for the better, right? Miguel smiled faintly. It has, but I still feel like there are things left behind. She swallowed hard. Dad, I know you still carry pain. It's not pain, Lorena, he said, turning to her. It's just hard to forget. She felt her heart tighten. Then let me fix this. Let me give you a reason to be with me on that day. He didn't respond immediately. He just looked away at the darkening night sky. Days went by, and Lorena decided not to press him anymore. But the uncertainty gnawed at her heart. On the last night before graduation, she finally mustered the courage to send a message. Dad, I really hope to see you there tomorrow. It's going to be a very important day for me. I love you. She waited a little longer. No response. She set her phone down beside her bed and stared at the dark ceiling of her room. What if he didn't go? What if everything they'd built over the past months wasn't enough? A silent pain tightened in her chest. She closed her eyes, trying to push that fear away. But the knot in her throat told her that something was about to happen. Lorena took a deep breath as she adjusted her work uniform over her body. Around her, the university corridors buzzed with students and families, all dressed elegantly for the ceremony. Women wore sophisticated dresses. Men donned impeccable suits. But her? She was in the simple t-shirt from the sandwich trailer and the worn-out jeans she wore every day to help her father. She felt the stares on her as she walked toward the main auditorium. Some were curious, others judgmental. But she didn't care. That day wasn't about looking grand. It was about being true to herself. Her chest felt heavy with uncertainty. She had spent the night wide awake, staring at her phone, waiting for a response that never came. And now, doubt consumed her. Would he come? Or had he decided to stay behind? The professors started calling the students for final organization. The packed auditorium, the speeches beginning, the buzz of guests. But everything felt distant to Lorena. Her eyes scanned the space, searching for a familiar face. Nothing. Miguel wasn't there. She tried to keep her composure, but disappointment was a tight knot in her throat. She had wished for that moment so much, not for herself, but so Miguel could see that everything he did, everything he suffered, everything he sacrificed, had been worth it. "Congratulations, Lorena," the voice of the dean sounded beside her. She forced a polite smile. "Thank you. Your teachers always speak of your effort. You worked hard to be here." Lorena nodded, feeling emotions swell within her. But then, an interruption in the speech caught the audience's attention. The dean frowned, glancing at the stage. Lorena followed her gaze, and her heart raced. There, standing next to the podium, was Miguel. He wore his simplest clothes, the same ones he wore at the trailer. But he was there. The shock made Lorena hold her breath. How? When? He had never mentioned anything. Silence fell over the auditorium as he took the microphone. "Good evening. I apologize for the interruption," Miguel began, his voice steady but laden with emotion. "I am Miguel, Lorena's father." Murmurs rose, eyes turned toward Lorena. "I thought a lot about whether I should come here today." He took a deep breath. "But I realized I needed to." A brief silence formed before he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, old, crumpled object. The badge. The same badge from the factory where he had worked for years, where he poured every ounce of his effort. He held it up slightly, letting the light reflect off the worn plastic. "For years, I carried this with me. Not just because it reminded me of the work I did, but because, behind it, I wrote down every extra hour I worked." He turned the badge, and even from a distance, Lorena could see the scribbles. "I noted every double shift, every weekend I gave up, every night I came home too late to tell my daughter a story." Miguel took a deep breath, seeming to gather courage to continue. "Ooh, but it wasn't just that I wrote down." He swallowed hard. "I also wrote the words my daughter said to me, when she told me I was an embarrassment, when she said she wished no one knew who I was." A collective whisper ran through the crowd. Lorena felt her heart crumble. "I kept those words because they hurt, but I also kept them because I wanted to believe that one day my daughter would regret saying them." Emotion overflowed in his voice. Lorena's eyes filled with tears. Slowly she stood up from her seat and walked to the stage. When she stood in front of Miguel, he looked into her eyes. She extended her hand, delicately touching the badge. "Dad, let me fix this." Her voice came out weak, trembling. Miguel blinked several times, as if holding something inside. "I kept this because I didn't know if I would ever be able to forget," he confessed. Lorena took a step closer. "Then tear it up." Miguel stood still. She swallowed her emotion. "Tear it up, Dad. Let me prove that this doesn't need to be between us anymore." His eyes shone with a mix of pain and love. For a few seconds, he hesitated. Then, with a firm gesture, he tore the badge in half. The sound of the plastic ripping echoed in the silence of the auditorium. Tears streamed down Lorena's face. She could no longer hold back. She threw herself into her father's arms. The embrace was strong, tight, filled with all the feelings that words could never express. The auditorium erupted in applause. Marisa, the teachers, the students, even the dean, all watched the moment with misty eyes. Miguel whispered against his daughter's hair. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand." Lorena sniffled quietly. "No, Dad, I took too long." They stayed there for long seconds, just feeling each other's warmth, letting the past finally dissolve. When Miguel pulled away, his eyes were misty, but a smile was forming at the corner of his lips. "Go get your diploma, daughter." She nodded, wiping her tears. She walked up to the stage, took the diploma in her hands, and looked at the audience, at Miguel, who now smiled as if he were the proudest man in the world. She raised the diploma in the air. "Dad, this diploma is yours too." Miguel chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No, daughter." He wiped his tears with the back of his hand and then said, in a tone that made the entire auditorium fall silent, "You are my greatest diploma." Lorena's heart stopped for a moment. And then, in that moment, everything made sense. The pain, the mistakes, the sacrifices, the love. Everything had brought them to that point. Everything had shaped them into who they were. And nothing else mattered beyond that. Life is unpredictable, full of twists, sacrifices, and moments of realization. Miguel's journey was one of unwavering love, silent struggles, and selfless devotion. Lorena's redemption came not just from regret, but from her decision to honor the man who gave everything for her future. This story reminds us that true success isn't about wealth or status. It's about the people who stand by us, even when we fail to see their worth. How many times do we take for granted those who sacrifice the most for us? If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an emotional journey like this. Hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. And don't stop here. Click on the next recommended video to continue watching more powerful stories that will move and inspire you. Thank you for being here with us. See you in the next story.